Evening. How is everyone? I want you to know I am excited to be here to share with you some of the most exciting news, most exciting thing, really, I think, other than meeting my wife, it's ever happened to me as a preacher, anyway. About 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, we were having an elders deacon meeting on an early Sunday morning, and we were talking about our YouTube outreach, and I was excited about it because we were reaching about, 3,000 views a year. I thought, wow, we're really, shaking things up on YouTube. One of our deacons was there. He's not quite 40 years old, so he knows this stuff. And he's like, well, if you were able to merge our YouTube with what's happening on Facebook, you'd be surprised at the results. We have hundreds of thousands now every year that are watching us. We have about 3,000 or 4,000 a day that are tuning in, watching what we're doing. I don't know what it is about these young people. They seem to know this stuff, but my point is, when we started getting the word out, we started getting messages, instant messages from all over the world. I mean, literally all over the world. So I started reading them. I was so excited. Most of them were, hey, I'm doing this. Can you help me? Send me money or whatever. I'm like, oh, well, okay. And after a while, you kind of get, a little bit jaded, I guess. I don't think I'm going to go any further. So you actually get to the point I did. I'm sorry to say, I was kind of guilty of just not paying attention. Until one day, I guess it was around September, early September of last year, I was going back over some of those messages. And there was this message from a young man by the name of Duncan from Kenya, Africa. And he said, I've been watching your lessons on YouTube, and I want to ask you about non-denominational Christianity. Now, that got my attention. I thought, now, that's different. So found out that he had WhatsApp on his phone. I guess you're familiar with that. I wasn't until sometime last year, but found out about WhatsApp, and I said, do you have a WhatsApp number? He said, I do. So we started talking on WhatsApp. And our first conversation was on a Monday around 11 o'clock, and told him a little bit about myself. He was telling me, I've already been watching you and keeping up with some of your lessons, and I'm intrigued about non-denominational Christianity. I said, well, I'm more than happy to talk to you about that. And so he said, would you mind having a regular meeting with me online? Maybe we could have a Bible study, and you could sort of mentor me online. I'm like, sure. And he said, could you study the book of Acts with me? I said, yes. Can you make this any easier for me? And so we began the next week studying the book of Acts. Now, I learned very quickly that Duncan had grown up experiencing much of what many people there in Kenya have experienced. He started off, he and his family, in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, this very big movement there in that part of Kenya. Kisii, Kenya, is where we were. But they were dissatisfied with that. Things didn't go well there, so they moved into the Pentecostal movement and were working with the Pentecostals for a period of time. But that's when he said he and his father decided, we're just going to go independent. We don't want to be associated with any of this. We know that something's off. So we began our study of the book of Acts, and as we did, it became clear to me he was very, very perceptive, extremely intelligent, and had a good heart. So we get to Acts 19, and we started talking about those disciples at Ephesus, and there's only one baptism. And he ended that lesson with me by saying, I've been thinking about this since we started this study, and I believe I need to be baptized again. I said, I believe that would probably be the best for you to do. He said, I've been talking to my father about it. Father's name is Isaac. Everybody's from the Old Testament there. My father's name is Isaac, except for Duncan. Anyway, but everyone else is named in the Old Testament. So he said, Isaac, my father wants to know more about this. So I began talking to his father. Long story short, his father agreed to interpret for me on a Saturday session using WhatsApp. I was able to preach to that little church under the trees where they're presently meeting, and was able to do that with video chat. It was kind of neat. I thought I'd never done that before. I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. That's not good. But I was excited to be able to preach to them nonetheless. And in the process was able to talk to Isaac. And Isaac is 63 or 64, a very influential man in his community. And after just a couple of studies, he said, I believe I'm a candidate for baptism. Again, making things quicker here, around the first week of December of last year, he and his son Duncan and 3 others were baptized into Christ for the remission of their sins. And I said, we really need to come meet you all because we had learned about several things. One of the things that I learned about, was their care for orphans. He told me we have about 210 children that we've taken under our wing to take care of and basically to raise. I thought, this is not possible. You can't do that. And so I asked him, I said, at one point, he never asked for money, he never said anything along those lines. But I finally one day said, I'm just curious, how do you feed these children? He said, well, my father gets a retirement. He was a school teacher, and from his retirement, we're able to feed them 1 meal a day. I said, oh. I said, well, how much does it cost to feed a child 1 meal a day? He said, one child, 1 meal a day for a month, $5. I said, really? $5? Yeah, $5. So $5, 1 meal a day. So if we had $2,000, then those 200 children roughly could have 2 meals a day, not just, and you're a math teacher. I'm saying that right, aren't I? Okay, so anyway, they said, yeah, that sounds about right. So I mentioned it at the church at Villarica, and lo and behold, out of the generosity of their hearts, they just began giving the money in addition to their regular contribution. And we've been doing that for 6 or 7 months now. So every month on the second or third Sunday, we take up a special collection, and we help feed those orphans. Now, the reason I made this trip was I frankly didn't believe what I was hearing and what I was seeing. I thought, this is just too good to be true. And if we're going to pursue this, I need to see firsthand. I had a little bit of Thomas in me. I thought I need to go and just put my hands on this situation to see if, in fact, what I've been thinking is happening is actually happening. And so we planned a trip, as you know, in January of this year, and we went to establish whether or not this was a for real thing, and indeed it was. And so all that work that we've been doing through YouTube was starting to pay off. I thought, well, this is kind of neat, able to see the results moving rather rapidly. Now, when we arrived, we met Duncan's family. This is the Abwacha family. Don't try to pronounce it. I'm still working on it. I've been working on it for about 8 months. Abwacha, I think is how you say it, but this is pretty much their family. This was the last day we were there, actually, so a little bit out of time. But this is the front yard where we were staying. They hosted us, by the way, went out of their way, I might add, to make accommodations for us and treated us like royalty. I've never been treated this way anywhere I've ever been in my life. I want to go back. I'm like, wow, that was good. That was a good experience. Just that alone. But anyway, we arrived, met the family, and I realized immediately that everything I thought about this family was not just true, it was even better than I thought. These are some of the most generous, kind-hearted, decent human beings I have ever met anywhere in my life. Genuinely care about others. They certainly care about those orphans. So Saturday, we began our work in earnest, and this house in the background, I don't know who it belonged to. This house is associated with the land that they're hoping to purchase, which is just below the hill here. You can't see that in the picture. I'm not sure whose house that was. No one ever bothered to explain that to us, and I never asked. But there was a yard here in front of the house that allowed us to set up tents. Now, initially, when we thought about going, Duncan said we could rent a tent. Before we completed our plan, we had rented 12 tents to accommodate the crowds that were coming. Now, the people you see pictured here, these are most of the orphans, not all of them. The younger ones did not make it on that Saturday, but they have a Saturday Bible study session. And they get together and they study the Bible. I'm able to sometimes speak to them through WhatsApp and what have you, but we were there and we were able to speak to them on that occasion. They were just wonderful children. Pardon me for being so blunt, but they had never seen, many of them, a white person. So they thought we were kind of neat. They wanted to touch us. Now, Herman was there with us, and a little 6-year-old girl came up behind him and touched his hand. He said, well, hey, sweetie, and she ran in fear of her life. I think she thought he was a ghost or something. I don't know what happened. But they're just sweet, genuine human beings. And we're able to spend some time talking to them. Herman was there with us on that day. We had birthday cake, which was a very unusual treat for them. And so we're able to treat them to birthday cake. Now, when I say treat them to birthday cake, I mean we had a cake, and of the nearly 200 children that were there, they all got a bite. And they were thrilled to have a bite. Some of them had, the frosting on it. Some of them didn't. They didn't care. They had a bite of cake, and they thought that was kind of neat. This little girl wanted to come home with us. I think Regina would have if we could have put her in our suitcase. But these little children just latched onto us. We latched onto them. Everything we thought is true, and then some. And this is just regarding the work they do among orphans. Now, you may say, but we're not in the business of taking care of orphans per se, although that is pure and undefiled religion, by the way. But that's not the sole purpose. What we learned on this trip, and they didn't use this expression, but they certainly practice this. We often say here, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so we learned on that trip that these people have really tremendously influenced that part of the world, that family, the Awacha family, by their care of these orphans. People listen to them, pay attention to them. And I'll say more about that in just a moment. But it's because of their genuine care, heartfelt care for these children. Now, this young man is, I guess, 7 or 8 years old. His name is Byron. His first language is Kisi. They call it Kisi. It's a form of Swahili. But he speaks English, and he speaks it very well. In fact, on this very occasion where I was speaking to this group, about 400 people had shown up on that Saturday for that study, and that included about 200 orphans. This young man, along with about 3 or 4 others, had come forward to do memory work. That's part of their routine. Again, he's probably 7 or 8 years old, but he quoted the entire chapter of John 3 in English. I was absolutely blown away. I thought I couldn't do that, and I speak English. I grew up speaking English, and he actually quoted the entire chapter of John chapter 3. So I had to call him back when he had taken a seat, and I just wanted to commend him, for his good work and his dedication to the Word of God and his understanding of the Word of God. It was profound. By the way, on this occasion, I carried my iPad that I stole from my wife, and I thought, well, I'll just carry this with me in case. And they had set up a podium, and I'll show that in a moment, but they'd set up a podium for me, and it was so far away, I thought, I want to get near the people so I can talk to them and interact with them. So I kind of stepped away, and they brought out a little portable podium, and they set it in the middle of the field. And so I set my iPad there, and I forgot we're on the equator, and so it was there about 5 minutes till it cooked, and it shut off. So I didn't have my outline. I thought, So I had to ad-lib it, and you can imagine the disaster that was. But I do remember on that occasion, after we got through with whatever I was rambling about, I thought, we really need a closer here. We need like an invitation, and we didn't have any of that. Of course, I'm running ahead of you because there's so much you don't know about what they don't know. They didn't know anything that you and I just take for granted, like offering an invitation at a church service, or having the Lord's Supper on the Lord's Day, and what that means and how to do that. All these things were questions they had to have answered. Now, on that Saturday, very quickly, I want to run through this, we served them their staple food, which is ugali. It's literally corn that's been ground into a powder and then reconstituted in water and cooked in a vat. That's what they eat with everything. And if you don't eat it with them, they're offended. And it's offensive to eat. I hope they're not hearing this. But it's not so that it tastes so bad, it just doesn't have any taste. It's like eating Play-Doh with no coloring in it. It's just bleh. But they want you to eat it with everything. I'm like, I don't want to eat ugali. But when you're in Kenya, you eat ugali. And we had goat. Thanks, Herman. We had goat. I had a lot of things I never experienced before. It was all good. When I say these things, it's like, oh, no, it's not primitive like you might think. It is, but not like you may think. These people actually made us feel like, and even said, we want you to feel like you're on vacation. And we did. They treated us very well. This is me, by the way, helping in the kitchen. And I know where the expression came from. If you can't take the heat, stay out of the kitchen. I wasn't in there long, mostly because of the stupid thing they put on my head. I'm not sure why. I don't have any hair. But anyway, they didn't want hair getting in the ugali. So they made me put the little net on. And we did the ugali, and I made some for them because they were anyway running out. We were able to go to the orphanage later that evening and visit there and just see firsthand some of the little ones that didn't get to make it to the Saturday session, and there were meeting some of them. They have a really nice facility. It has been given to them, or not given, but it's just loaned out to them indefinitely by some benefit. I don't know who it is. They didn't tell me who this was. Some nice person has said, here's a building, you can use it, and they've made it into dormitories. They have a kitchen, they have all these things. These are some of the rooms they had set up. I mean, again, it's not the most desirable place in the world, but when you live there in Kenya and you have no family, this is desirable. This is a wonderful place to live, and they, of course, enjoyed it. We were able to take some of the cake that was left over and share a bite with them as well. Sunday morning, we went back to the same place, and this is when things got interesting. They intentionally made us late. I'm never late for church. Anybody that knows me knows I'm at the church building at least an hour or two before every service. And so we showed up literally as we were supposed to be starting the service. And they did that by design. They'd set up a special tent just for us and told us we had to sit here. I don't want to sit. I want to sit there. No, you got to sit over here. Didn't have time to argue. We're getting ready to start a church service, and we're going to do things they've never done before because we were there to talk to them about the pattern of New Testament Christianity. And this is how the New Testament church worships. And these are the things that God requires. These people are like sponges. They're like theological sponges. They are literally soaking it up. And whatever we say, okay, that's good. We've never had it explained to us like that before. Tell us more. And so we were able to experience much of that with them. We had about 1,700 in attendance. I've been told initially, I've been told by Duncan, we're going to have probably 1,000 people there. I thought, yeah, sounds great, thanks, but I'm coming anyway. But we got there, and there were about 1,700 people that morning when we arrived, and they had set up this pulpit thing, homemade pulpit thing, and you can see I'm kind of away from everyone. I don't like that. Anyway, I'm away from them, and we have this older gentleman who's standing there on the ground beside me who is reading all of my passages in Kisi, or it's a form of, again, Swahili. And so rather than me reading in English and then he read it in Swahili, I just had him in advance know what the Bible verses were, and when I got to those, I'd have him read them. So he would stop and take 5 or 10 minutes to clear his throat, and I'm like, Ken, I forgot my train of thought. Where's Ken? I mean, you were telling me something a moment ago, and I said, what was that? I don't know, I forgot. I mean, I had that experience many times. I thought, what am I preaching today? So I had to go back to my notes. But it's difficult and it's challenging, especially when you're having someone interpret for you. But then when you have someone reading for you, and when they read Acts 2:38 in Swahili, it takes about 20 verses for our one to read it. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of 2:38. But anyway, they would go through these verses point by point, and it took a while. But we preached. When we were finished preaching, of course, by the way, I want to mention, people were literally coming out of the woodwork, out of the mountains, the side of the mountains here, because they heard us over the speaker. We were broadcasting over these huge speakers, and it's reverberating around the mountains, and people heard us, and they thought, we want to go hear this crazy person. And so they came out to hear us. We found out there were people that walked 28 miles. They got up in the middle of the night to come to that church service walking. I thought, that's amazing. I've never seen anyone or experienced anything like that here, but they were coming literally from everywhere. You see pictured here, this is the tent right next to where we were sitting. It's hard to tell the depth, but most of the people you see pictured here are preachers from different churches. And they had heard from Isaac and from Duncan that we would be there this week. And so they came and wanted to investigate. They wanted to hear, as they called it, the pure gospel presented by the man of God. I know. Many of you know me. They don't. And so they refer to me as the man of God who is going to preach to us the pure gospel. You know, a prophet's not with, anyway. So we were able to meet many preachers from many churches. And so they showed up that day, and they were very interested in what we had to say. My lesson was on the book of Hebrews, answering the question, who is Jesus? And the answer is prophet, priest, and king. And I was taking this approach because Seventh-day Adventism is still very much entrenched in that part of the world. And so they needed to understand the breakaway from the old law into the new. And they needed to understand our relationship to our God through Jesus and not through Moses and the prophets. And as I was told many times, people here know the Old Testament very well. They know nothing of the New Testament. And I can testify to that. It's true. They know very little, if anything at all, about the New Testament. But these people were here interested. This is Isaac. This is Duncan's father. And he did this spontaneously. I didn't even speak to him about it. After we'd observed the Lord's Supper, by the way, Herman was there that day and did an outstanding job. Herman does better, I think, in a foreign field than he does here, but he always does good. But there, he did an outstanding job, and he preached an outstanding lesson on the Lord's Supper and the New Testament pattern of observing the Lord's Supper. And we observed it there. We had those COVID containers, I call them, but we had prepackaged containers, the only way we knew to serve it. But we served about 1,800 people that day, the Lord's Supper, and they were just fascinated. And Herman did such a great job. But when we're finished with that, I thought, I finished my sermon. Herman did the Lord's Supper. We had the prayers, and they sang songs in English just for us. I thought that was really neat, too, and I appreciated it. But when we got done, I'm thinking, we need somebody to kind of to bring this to a conclusion and maybe offer an invitation or something. And this man apparently thought the same thing. They'd already told me there were about 20 to 30 people they said they thought were ready to be baptized from December to January. They'd found about that many people that they'd been studying with. I said, well, that's great. We need to go ahead and baptize them. So he gets up and he offers the invitation, and they started coming forward. And before we know it, by the way, that's a well. If you step in it, you could die. But anyway, they were standing next to this well. I'm scared them to death. But they're standing next to this well, and about 60 showed up. In fact, it was 60 altogether. And we baptized that many. I did it left-handed. I've never baptized people left-handed. That's the first in my life. But I had no choice, and I was tired. I've never been physically tired from baptizing people. I was worn out. I'm glad I had Herman to help me. But we got down in that creek, and we baptized, 60 people. And it was something I've never experienced. In fact, come to find out, they've never experienced this in Kesey either. They've never seen crowds of this size to show up for a church service. They've never seen this many people express a desire to be baptized, and in fact, to be baptized. So then Monday, that was Sunday, and it was a big day. But then when the day was over, we got to bed, got up early the next day, wasted a lot of time trying to get money exchanged at the bank until we found out later we could just give the money to Duncan. He could have put. There's a communication breakdown, and we're learning that. So I'm glad we had this first experience. We learned many things we're not going to repeat. But we were able to go, and this is before we went to Rian Yatike, Rian Yatike, a church on the mountain, they call it. Some of these people walked from this place about 29 miles to hear that sermon the day before. And so we went out to visit them. But before that, I had the opportunity to preach New Testament Christianity, a return to the New Testament pattern, to 40 to 50, I didn't get a count, and nobody bothered to take a picture. Thanks, Herman, Regina. But nobody took a picture, but we had 40 to 50 people there, and I was able to speak directly to them about our relationship to the law, about the New Testament church, about following the New Testament pattern, about being Christians and Christians only, and our general approach to the restoration. And they were just gobbling it up. When I got done, they wanted to ask questions. And the first question, I'll never forget, it was from the 150th Psalm. He wanted to know, since you mentioned a cappella singing and non-instruments of music, I'm just curious, what do you say to someone who asks, and he was meant himself, but what do you say to someone who asks about the 150th Psalm? Because they were singing, and playing instruments there. Luckily, Isaac was near the front row, and I said, that's true. But if we read the 150th Psalm, they were dancing there too. Who in this group wants to see this man dancing next Sunday? And they all laughed. Not us. We don't say, oh, okay, but if you're going to bring in the instruments, you got to bring in the dance. So we got to figure out what kind of dance that is. We're not going to do that. And then we explained to them that the other psalms mentioned, the sweet-smelling savor of the sacrifices and other things that are mentioned throughout the psalms. And when I got done, I'm just waiting. Okay, it's coming. I know I just gave you an answer, so hit me. Come on, let's find your counter-argument. He looked at me. He smiled. He said, thank you. That was helpful. Oh, okay. Another man in the back said, I got a question. He said, you said the old law is done away. Well, what purpose does it serve? I said, So I answered as best I could based on what Paul said to the Galatians and to the Corinthians. When I got done, he said, that's helpful. Thank you. I'm still speechless. I'm like, but there's got to be an argument. There's got to be there is no counter because there's no prejudice built in. They're just wide open. They're like, hey, that's good. We needed to hear. They don't know. They're just honestly asking what pops in their head. It's not because they have an agenda. It's because they don't know. And when you're able to explain it to them, it is the most refreshing thing I've ever experienced. It truly is refreshing. And so, anyway, we went to visit these people it's Rian Yatiki. To make it easier, Duncan says the Church on the Mountain. This is another church they've been working with, trying to encourage, and Lord's willing, in September, when we return, our primary campaign will be here at Rian Tiki, which is about 28 miles from where we were. This is the inside of their building, and these people that are pictured here heard we were coming, and some of these are the same people that came 28 miles the day before, but they're here once again to hear my presentation of New Testament Christianity, which I had a few moments to do. And so we're able to meet with them briefly, come to find out some of their needs, and hopefully prospect for, again, a future campaign. That was exciting. It was this is the outside of the back of their building. It's hard to tell. Pictures don't do justice. This is a beautiful scene from where they are. Just forget the black mamas. They're in the bush. You can't see them, but you can look straight out and you see this beautiful scenery. Now, the next day, we were treated, this is Tuesday, we were treated to something we weren't expecting, but Duncan said, we want you to have the full Kenyan experience. And so we went on a safari, and I wasn't expecting it, never had thought about doing it in my life, but here we are in Kenya, and that's what we did. We went on a safari. It was an experience in and of itself. It's beautiful. I mean, when you go to those grasslands and you see all those creatures, and you're up front, you're right there with them, and they could come up and eat you out of your open Jeep. That's kind of exciting too. But that was interesting. But I share that with you because on that Tuesday, it took about 2 hours to get to where we were going to start the safari. It gave me an opportunity to study with Isaac further, who desperately needs grounding in the truth. And so I was able to share time with him because he had been so busy, which I didn't mention this. I know I'm saying a lot, and I've got a lot to say, and I can't get it all said, but these people are the most kind, most hospitable people I've ever encountered. Isaac had literally worked himself almost to death just to make things pleasant for us, and he pulled it off. It was a very pleasant experience. We had a very pleasant time there, and they treated us, like I said, like royalty. But he was so busy, I didn't really have a chance to talk to him, so that trip to and from the safari allowed me opportunity to talk to him. So then Wednesday, surprise, surprise, Herman and I didn't know it. We were loaded up in a car, and we were taken from school to school. The people you see depicted here are the orphans. There were many more students than this at that school, but these are just pictured here, the orphans that are going to this particular school. And yes, I was told at the last second, you're going to speak to them. Okay, great. So I had to pull something out of my hat and speak to them. We got a chance to meet some of those children. We went to another school, and Herman and I were thronged. I now know what the New Testament means when it says they were thronging him. We were thronged by children, and in fact, we had a man, you can't see pictures here, but he had to come and beat them off so we could go and talk to these very important gentlemen about the work that's going on with these orphans. And I mentioned that already, but it really makes a difference. It's like plowing the field and preparing the soil so that when you plant the seed, it has an easier time to produce and give a great harvest. These people have been preparing the soil for some time, and they've been working with these orphans for some time. And we were just learning while we were there, and this is what we learned on that Wednesday. we were just learning about some of the remarkable things they're doing. And it's truly a remarkable thing they're doing with these young people. They're treating them as though they are their own children, as though they've adopted them. In essence, I suppose they have. But again, we have been able, and we've been blessed, by the way, to do this, to help them and aid them in that. Now, I'm going to go back for a second, because on that Wednesday, while Herman and I were literally captured and taken from school to see all these things, Regina got to stay behind and visit with the ladies of the house, and able to do something that I had not been able to do in all the months I've been talking to Duncan, namely to convince the ladies of the house to obey the gospel themselves. So 3 of them expressed a desire to be obedient to the gospel that day. Then that Wednesday night, we all assembled there in their house, and I was able to share with them Ephesians 4, the one baptism that we talked about with Duncan earlier from Acts 19. And we went through that whole lesson, and Duncan's younger brother that night also expressed a desire to obey the gospel. So the next morning, we were able to talk to a local hotel who let us use their swimming pool. It was very nasty, but we used the pool anyway, and we were able to baptize 4 precious souls more on that Thursday morning as we were preparing to leave and come back. It was a short trip. Much of the time we spent was traveling, grueling traveling experience, getting there and getting back. About 4 days altogether in travel time, going and coming. So we had to do what we did in a hurry, and so we're learning from that as well. But we had 4 more that obeyed the gospel that morning, and that was an exciting way to kind of bring a wrap up that trip. Now, I want to share with this is something I received last week, a message from Duncan. I just copied and pasted it. It's not edited, and you'll see I didn't edit it. But these are his words. This is what he said to me. After finishing studying the book of Acts together with you, I felt that our people also needed to have a taste of this sweet tea. This was not a study, but a spiritual foundation that you built in me. So I decided to share the thought I had with my dad of meeting with elders, that's what they call the older men in the church, on Wednesday, to do a study with them using the notes that we made. Today, my dad shared some of the videos during their study. Thank you so much for your time and dedication, also for sharing your knowledge of the book of Acts. These 12 men are the men that he was talking about that had assembled at his father's house and are assembling and continuing the study of the book of Acts. So what we were able to do in those initial months is ongoing, and that's being led by Duncan's father. I don't know if this video will play. I guess it would. Yeah, that plays. This is the living room, by the way, the house where we stayed, and it's just surrounded with chairs and hard couches, but nevertheless, it was comfortable. This is the man that did the reading for me on Sunday morning, and he's teaching from the book of Acts as well on that occasion. But Duncan wanted to share this with me to let me see that they're still continuing the work, that it has not ceased. This here is very important. And I'm just wrapping everything up, but this is a piece of land. This is the building where Duncan and his family and that church meet in Kisii, Kenya, presently. It holds about 150 to 200 people, not nearly large enough because their little church is growing and growing rapidly. But there's a piece of land here, a pretty good-sized piece of land. And so Duncan sent me this message about the man who owns it. As this, all this long, the man who happens to be one of our church members didn't want to sell this piece of land until early last year when his wife was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. This has made the man and his sons use all their investment to take the mother, there's a divide in your thing back there. Did y'all know that? You can't really read it anyway. Take the mother back and forth to India to seek treatment. Last year, the man approached my dad and said he finally wanted to sell the piece of land to the church to cater for her hospital. I think that's what it says. I'm going to read it this way. Wanted to sell the price of land to cater for her hospital bills for his wife. And after ongoing time negotiated with him, he finally decided to give us the land at $55,000. And he said we could do that in installments, $20,000, then another $20,000, then $15,000. So land is very scarce there, and it's expensive there. And so again, That's unfortunate, but if there's any way some of you good brethren can come up with some of this money, that would be put to very, very good use. So anyway, just want to share that with you. Also, the ongoing work with the orphans, you think, well, man, that's a lot of kids they've got. Look at what he sent me just a couple of days ago. My dad and I have had this vision, and we have been praying for God to open doors for us to get a permanent land where we can build our wonderful treasures. That's what they call their orphans. A place where they call home and have them a sense of belonging, which is important in nurturing them. We've also been praying that by the end of 2027, we'll be able to accommodate at least 500 kids. There's so many kids in our waiting and approval list that we're not able to take up due to lack of accommodation, other necessities. We want them to have good accommodation rooms, more of what you saw. Also, since we receive abandoned kids who are even 1 day old, we plan to do a small newborn unit where we will give them special care till they're of age, et cetera, et cetera. We also want to do a small dining room for them where they can also eat and use it as a study area. I know that sounds like a big bite to chew. These are amazing people. That's all I can say. They're amazing people. And they put us all to shame as far as their big heart, their kind gestures. They mean it when they say, we want these children to have a place that they think of as home. They love these children. They're not just taking them on. They're treating them as their own children. It's it's transforming to be around people who are of this caliber. And I'm thankful that I've had the opportunity. I know Regina is blessed. Herman, we all have been blessed to be there. We have about 8 so far that have planned to go back with us in September and to continue the work there. There are many ongoing needs. It is a beautiful country. I would ask for your prayers. I want to thank you, some of you individually, but congregationally, you did assist on our last trip. And for that, we are very grateful. And the people of Kenya. And Duncan told me this past Monday, he wanted me to share that with you, just how much they appreciate your helping us to get there. It's a beautiful place. This, by the way, is across the street from his house. He didn't bother to tell me that, or Herman, until the day we got ready to leave. But Eden is right across the street from his house, and we got to go and see that. And it was a beautiful place. This is Lake Victoria. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's a beautiful, large lake, one of the largest salt-free lakes on planet Earth. It's actually the headwaters of the Nile River because, the Nile runs north into the Mediterranean, and it starts in this part of Kenya, not far from where we were. Beautiful country. And so when we think about those people and the good work that's happening there, it's exciting because there's a transformation. People are dissatisfied with Catholicism, Protestant denominationalism. They're dissatisfied with some of these so-called evangelical groups that have come in. They are wanting, hungering, thirsting for, begging for what they call the pure gospel. And it's my desire to do what I can, and I know that you feel the same, to carry the pure gospel to these people that are genuinely seeking it. And in some ways, living it. In some ways, better than we are. But they still have much to learn as we can from them. It's been a mutually beneficial thing. So please, remember the good people of Kenya. Remember us as we travel just a week and a half, I think. We're going to be going to Uruguay. That'll be another trip we have planned very shortly. But again, why are we going to these places? Why are we doing these things? Because without the gospel, people around the world have the same problem we have. And it's the greatest problem we will ever confront. It's the problem of sin. And we all are plagued with it because all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. Not just true here, it's true there, it's true everywhere. And only the gospel can give them the opportunity to escape the dreadful consequences of sin and through a knowledge of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Thank you. And I mean that from my heart. Thank you for your help, for your support, and your participation in this good work. Please pray for them. If I can help you with any questions or you want to say more about it, we can talk afterwards. But at this time, we're about to sing the song of invitation, I believe. Where did Jimmy get off to? I've been looking at you the whole time. You didn't say amen. I'm mad at you. So, okay, all right. You're forgiven. So We did announce the invitation song. I wasn't paying attention. Sorry. Anyway, like the people of Kenya, there may be some present here tonight that have never obeyed the gospel. I'm sure the baptistry is filled, the clothes are prepared, everything's ready. All we're waiting for is your decision. If we can assist you with that, I ask, as Ananias did Saul, what are you waiting for? Arise, be baptized, wash away your sins, calling on the name of the Lord. If we can help you, make your need known while we stand and while we sing.